Here at BizVision, we're committed to our consciousness agenda with our shows, our academy, our scorecard, and so on. We also know that in today's altered world, all businesses need to consider consciousness. After all, it's now not what you do that counts, but who you are that wins you the reputation and new customers. The trouble is that too few companies have woken up to the real buzz that a diverse and inclusive business can deliver to its people, its customers, its vendors, its investors. In this web show with a difference, I'm delighted to have a guest who is to the foremost in consciousness thinking, especially around the gender agenda. She is the founder and CEO of TGC Worldwide, Charlie Fusco. Welcome, Charlie.
Malcolm, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
It's lovely to talk to you. Now, this special Charlie Fusco BV-TV WebShow is in our usual web show 3 parts. In part 3, Charlie will tell us how to go about having a true, diverse and inclusive business. In part 2, she'll talk to you about the benefits to you of your business being consciously diverse and inclusive. And in part 1, her thoughts and observations of what's happening about it all at the moment in this changing world. But before we get into that, let's ask Charlie what TGC Worldwide is and what it does, and why she's got this title, That Girl Charlie. Over to you.
Thank you. That's a great intro. A lot to cover. So the That Girl Charlie, TGC Worldwide, came about for a couple of reasons. For about 20 years, I ran a different agency. I owned my own direct-to-consumer agency. And if you could buy it in a store, we sold it on TV. Every infomercial product you could possibly think about, potion, lotion, vacuum. We had a 500-person call center. We bought media. And so for 2 decades, I sold things on TV that I wouldn't ever buy. And so, in 2018, I looked around and said, I'm cutting hundreds of dollars of, hundreds of checks every week. And why? Just so I can sell another, supplement on television. And I kind of went through this moment of what am I going to do for the next 2 decades and really wanting to put good stuff in the world, and thought, well, how am I going to do that? Right? I don't have a product. I don't have a service. But what I did realize was that a lot of my clients at the time were asking me to help them build other companies or other legacy projects that had nothing to do with our TV. They just liked the way that we creatively put things together. And I started looking at those people and I thought, look at all the good they're putting in the world. Their donations, their foundations, their thought leadership. And I thought, what if we could amplify their message and have this sort of stable of do-gooders that we make bigger and bigger and bigger. And so their impact is bigger in the world. So then fully, I could then take credit, or my agency, for, putting more good in the world. And so that became that. And very quickly, I sold the other agency and started TGC Worldwide. And how the name came about was my small team that I kept in my kitchen. What should we call this new company? That they weren't even sure was a real company. Like, who would do what I just said, right? That's not a real business. And they said, well, why don't we just call it That Girl Charlie? Because that's how everyone gets referred to you, Right. And I said, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to put my name in the company. And so I said, fine, we'll put the initials. And so that's how that came in. But typically the way people find us is they'll say, Malcolm, I have this idea and there's all these random thoughts and I need you, what do you think? And you're going to say, I don't know. But that girl, Charlie, go call this girl, Charlie, and she'll figure out how to connect the dots. And that's sort of the way that the company came about.
I love that story. It's really good, isn't it? Really nice.
Fun. I guess when I took my small team, we went from 100 plus employees and I brought 5 along with me to the new company. And I said, okay, guys, we have 75 days of payroll money. And so this is the criteria. This is the avatar. We have a very specific avatar for our clients. And we're going to start this company. And they said, we are going to go bankrupt. There's no people that exist that, think the way this. And I said, okay, well, we have 75 days to prove me right. Right. And we were shocked by the fact that there are so many really conscious people out there trying to do some amazing things in the world. And we're really blessed to work with a huge majority all over the world.
Yeah. I have been finding some fantastic stories, Charlie. We'll chat about them as we get into it. Now, for part 1, What's happening in the world of diversity, inclusion, and the opportunity for women in business at the moment, especially in the dynamic, creative world that you're part of? Are you seeing the right changes? Do you think clients are yet seeking to work with a diverse vendor? Let's have your thoughts and observations.
Yeah, it's such a big question, and an important conversation. I am always the optimist. So some people look at gender inclusion, diversity inclusion, race, and all these things as a very big, heavy weighted topic. I look at it as a just a really great place in our human evolution of growth. You know, I think it was in August and September, they released a report that said something like 860,000 women left the workforce, right? Kids came back to home from school, one parent has to make a decision. And it was, I think only like 200,000 men left in that same period, right? And so my daughters ran in and they said, see, mom, women aren't treated equal. Look, they're going back to the 1950s again, right? And I think going through this period, if you have teenagers in general, you really understand that this diversity inclusion movement is important, because teenagers are the most vocal right now about how screwed up the conversation has been in the past, right? And so, a part of me thought, gosh, there's a lot of women leaving the workforce. But at the same time, there's some brilliant statistics around how many women-led companies are actually outperforming, and how many women angel investors and women that are buying and doing more deals in the business sector than men. So I think that there's always a balance, right? And you have to be careful what news program you listen to. I think that but it is a way to rethink the world, because it's not like women are going back to and leaving the workforce. They're going back to their home. Well, we're all at home right now, men, women, children, right?
Yeah.
So I began to think about, well, now there can't be a stigma. I left the workforce. Now, you may have decided not to collect a paycheck from the company you're at, but from a creativity, I don't see how anybody can't make a living between all the online opportunities that you can work from anywhere in the world to this point. And so then when you look at diversity and inclusion, the first thing I think is really important to point out, diversity means that you include every group, right? Race, gender, sexuality, religious background, age, all of that. But a lot of times people forget the inclusion part. And inclusion has nothing to do with that. It has to do with making those people feel welcome, right? And erasing this concept of I feel othered, right? And so I think that there is the challenge. It's not that companies aren't actually, almost by necessity now, you're not hiring people the good old fashioned way, you're hiring on Zoom. So you might be hiring in 10 different countries and 10 different states. You now have the opportunity to hire old, young, black, white, every religion, right? It's the inclusion part that I think we have to get right as a global society. And how do we make everyone feel welcome? And that's where you have to be conscious. So I think for women right now, I think they're struggling almost as much as men, in the sense of rebirth, having to take a moment of pause and say, okay, my life just got turned upside down. And whether you're running a company or you've come, left, right? If you're in transition. Back in March, when the world stopped, I had a week where I was internally panicked, right? I didn't let my team know any of this, but I thought, there's no way what my team does is an essential business.
Yeah.
None, right? What I do for a living is as frivolous as, anything. And so I thought, here we go. I'm going to have to rebuild. I'm going to have to do something different. And for a week, I just had this pit in my stomach, because on my team, I have everyone from 60-year-old down to 18. I have married with children, single, in college. I have people that work for me in Australia, in Russia, Texas, all over. And I thought, I can't put these people out of work, just because I sillily built this non-essential business. And then the phone started ringing and ringing and ringing. And we had probably our best quarter ever. And the reason is I think people have sort of figured out that they can do a lot, even in this changing world. And I think that is because diversity, inclusion, impact investing, all of that's on the rise. So once we got out of the fear period, it started to become creative. And so I just don't see the same stress. I think it's such an opportunity to what I suggest is if you're looking for great talent, then hire for talent first and make that your biggest thing, work ethic. And then really what I say is like throw out the time clock. Inclusion starts with recognizing that it doesn't matter when these people do their work. It matters that they do great work consistently. And so by doing that, you can make the mom that has to stay at home with the kid and tutor during the day feel included in the company. And you can find the person that can only work at night because of their situation and really create it. So the first thing is, just throw out the time clock. We offer all of our team vacations, but we also don't monitor their days off. If they need to do, they go do it. And I think so the first thing for companies is to just chill out and let employees be great. And that's the first way to, I think, start inclusion. The other way is transparency, which I think is really difficult, is just telling your team and telling your clients what's happening. So those are certain things. And I think if you're looking to find a new career, just realizing that everyone's in the same boat. And if you lead with what is amazing about you and what you can offer, and you're clear and concise, I think there's so many opportunities right now, collaboration.
Yeah. It's almost like we've got a level playing field, isn't it? Or a new playing field. And CEOs have got to learn to be visible. And perhaps some of their junior people were more visible than the CEOs now.
Yeah. I think there's always, especially, back when everything started happening, and then there was the rioting and there was just race and then these crazy elections, especially leaders, right? CEOs and thought leaders, and kind of had to come inward and say, okay, what side am I on? What if I say this? Do I anger my customer base? Do I lose that in a shaky economy? Or they'll go, nope, this is my time. I'm going to take a stand. This is when my company glows. And then also looking at the employees, right? And looking at your team and your customers, and how do you articulate that? And I think that's been a very big responsibility for CEOs, is to really sit back and say, how do I create a open, transparent, inclusive conversation with everyone around me? And that took a lot of, time. So one of the reasons we got so busy was because, we work in brand evolution with clients doing great things. Mm-hmm. But they all had to come to us and say, hey, we have to have a discussion. Should we be changing our messaging right now? And so everything that we do, from, authoring books to putting movies on to social, we had to all stop and say, what is the global conversation shift that this person, the CEO, has to have?
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thanks, Charlie. It seems to me that a terrific opportunity exists for a company to have a diverse and inclusive future. So, Charlie, in part 2, tell us what needs to be done and why and how to achieve a sound and implementable, let's call it a gender agenda strategy. What are the real benefits to a business of such a strategy?
Really, really interesting question and a tongue twister, gender agenda.
Yeah,
I think everything really comes down to, I say this to my kids all the time, just plain old fashioned manners. And the first thing that you do as a sign of good manners is you listen first and talk less. And I think that's one way that everyone can calm down, because, listening provides data. Listening allows you to empathize, which I think is the next situation. Empathy allows us to see that everyone's world's changed. Empathy allows us to see that what's stressing us out is not stressing this other person out, but that doesn't, make it any less stressful. And then I think the third thing to bring gender agenda together is really creativity. I think we all have to break open our normal thought process, right? The way you run a business is just blow it up and then be creative and say, how can we run this business now? Because we've listened to our teams, we've listened to our customers, we understand their concerns, their stresses, their goals. Okay, cool. How do we creatively make sure they're happy first? And then right there, I think you just have to, niche or customize, right? When instead of saying, a CEO's job or a CMO's job or a secretary's job, are you even allowed to say secretary anymore? I feel like that's not a good word. And I think there's an example of acknowledging when you're not being inclusive and when you're not being diverse. And I think we all have to give ourselves some time. But there doesn't have to be a traditional job description. And I think for me, when we look at my team, Laura is one of our photographers, and she actually came to the company to be a photographer. But I was like, Laura, come over here. I need help here. I need help. And her skills just started to amplify. And so now when we go out and interview, we actually put out ads, whether it be on, Monster or LinkedIn, and we create very quirky, specific job titles that actually mean nothing. And then in the ad, we will put what we're trying to achieve, almost like, hey guys, this is the big goal. And we are flooded with resumes of people that have never done those things, but when we interview them, they know exactly how to solve our problem. And so that's been sort of fun. I think the other gender agenda topic really is non-local or global. Global hiring, or just, you don't ever have to look at your zip code again or your office. Some would argue their business must be run in a physical location. I would argue we just disproved that, right? And if your business is so constructed in such a tight way that it has to be, then your business is broken. And so here's a way to go and fix it. So I think now it's really about being very specific about what you want, and then going out and having other people tell you how to get it as a CEO. And then similarly with, with clients, it's the same process, doing a check-in, what's stressing your business, right? Like caring more about their business than what you've been hired to do for them. And what are their tough spots? And are there any ways that you can creatively step up to help them solve it, And then from there, really look at, is there ways to include other people in that solution, right? Whether that's bringing in a different vendor, doing collaborations. I think we're in a brilliant time for collaboration, consolidation of companies, expansions, buys, mergers. And I think that we as a human race can really look at this and say, hey, we can support each other and make ourselves stronger, And so that's where I predict is going to happen. As far as, race and women and, LGBTQ community, that's a hard question for me to lead people and answer to, because it's never mattered to me before, right? And at the same time, in me saying that makes me part of the problem, right? It has to matter. And so just because I, in the past, have said, oh, I don't see those things, I just see great people, I think we need to start seeing those people and then the greatness in the people we normally wouldn't look at, And so it's a slight mind shift. But I think, COVID and the lockdowns really has given us an opportunity to figure out that it's just the wild, wild west. We now have an unlimited future. And I think the other thing that I would probably end with is that every company, CEO, employee right now, I believe, should be 100% focused on the impact they put in the world. Is what you're doing putting good stuff in the world? Because especially right now, if you're 15 years old, that's all you care about. You're just looking at the world saying, I don't want to spend time or money or even my educational hours with people and topics that I don't believe in, that I don't feel are doing good. And so going back to listening and being empathetic, I think companies need to understand, well, how are you putting good in the world? It's not just about donating. It's, are you providing jobs? Are you donating to the right places? Are you having your employees allowed to dedicate time to charitable work? Are you creating solutions in the world that solve big, big problems, right? Whether it's diversity or capitalist issues or climate change, right? So I think what we're going to see in the next 18 months is this massive shift to impact investing, social, conscious company activities. And that's a big shift, because I think from a CEO standpoint, especially in crisis, CEOs go inward. And when you go inward, the transparency starts to go away and the listening starts to go away. So I think we have to be really, really conscious of that. And I think if you're rebuilding, if you're one of the almost million women that left the workforce, I think you have to sit and say, okay, how do I not be stressed, angry, fearful? How do I figure out how to make an impact? Because if I go to a company or I'm a freelancer and a client base, if I can go and say, hey, here's how I can put good in your company, or here's how I can put, good out there, now your voice is going to be more amplified. I just really think
Yeah.
we're in a place where good is the louder voice.
Excellent. I love that. I totally love what you're saying there. So just before we move into the part 3, Charlie, I just want to remind everybody that on the screen behind me is your URL to tgcworldwide.com. That's for the listeners. For the viewers can write it down. tgcworldwide.com. It really is a great company. We're enjoying working with you. With a number of your clients have been our guests, and they're brilliant. They're brilliant clients. So, okay, Charlie, a business has done all the thinking that Charlie recommends. The leaders know the benefits of sound diversity with equal opportunities and have developed a sound and realistic strategy. But as you well know, a strategy is no good unless it's executed or implemented and communicated effectively. So in part 3, let's hear from you how a company can go about such execution and how TGC Worldwide can help in the communication of that strategy, both internally and externally.
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I think a company, a brand, a founder, a CEO that is trying to use their knowledge base or their influence to solve problems or grow, the impact around their company. It's really important because you have to be very intentional. And I'm a big fan of vocabulary. And so when a client calls us and they say, hey, we have this thing we want to do, we've got this business that's doing 100 million a year, and I want to grow myself, and here's what I want to talk about. The first thing we look at is, well, are you using the same words that everyone else in your industry is using? Because if you are, then that's just a common vocabulary and you don't stand out, nor your message. And so we really go down and ask, how are you explaining your story? And your story really should come from the goals that you have and the people and the services you want to help people with. And then the you part is way at the end, So we really do look at and say, does this founder or CEO know and understand the brilliance of their own story? And then can they articulate it with the right words? And then those right words need to be shared within the company. The company has to believe that that's what their message is. And then they have to be really diligent in your social media, in your interviews, in any correspondence or collateral material. Everything has to have that very unique vocabulary, because otherwise it's just too difficult in this cluttered world to get brilliant messages across. I think that the other thing is you really need to make sure that your team is fully empowered to make decisions and fully empowered. And one of the really great things, I think, when you look at diversity inclusion, and if you can make that happen in your company, some of the things that it increases overnight, and they've done this, right? I mean, I think at the low end, diverse companies that focus on inclusion, right? Transparency, town hall meetings, employee services, all these kind of things are finding 21% higher engagement, higher creativity. And so when you look at things as a CEO or as a leader, I think it's making sure when a client comes to us, we let the client talk. Then we as a team say, hey, why are we excited about this person? What do we think we can do to help this person? And everyone in the company chimes in with their skill set: designers, videographers, writers, account managers. And then we always go back to our core mission, which is we're trying to bring these big unicorn founders doing great things in the world globally, put them together so that they create more impact. And so we look at creative ways to have our client base help each other out and telling their story. And so it's important that everyone on the team buys into that. I guess the other thing, we ask some very important questions. So if a client comes to us, I think we probably accept 2 out of 10 people that come to us. And the reason being is that we have a very set criteria. One is the product or the message or the service or whatever you're talking about selling, trying to get people trained on. If a 15-year-old kid walked in, could you explain it to them and have them say, yeah, I think that's important, even if I'm not going to do it, right? I'm not saying people have to sell to 15-year-olds. What I'm saying is somebody at that age has to believe that what your company is doing is important in the world. Because if they don't, where are you going to be? They're your new consumer base, right? And then the second thing would be, in 10 years, is what your company doing going to be relevant? And if it's not, you should shift your company stuff now. You should shift your messaging. We also look at founders that come to us, CEOs, and we ask, are you coming because you want to be popular or because you want to build a sustainable impact business? And if you want to be popular, there's like a million PR agencies out there that can do that. And if you want to be big on social media, a lot of people can do that. So if you don't look at your growth as a business, right? People are like, I'm not a business, I'm just the person. Nope. Everything you do has to be measured, and measured by, not just growth and media hits and books sold and tickets sold, but really by that vocabulary we talked about.
Yep.
People start using it because what you're talking about resonates. And so that's where we look at it. And then, of course, for us, we ask that anybody we work with has to be in some position of impact. They might be the head of a foundation. They might be raising money with the sale of their products. They may be creating impact work or speaking on it. And then we have the big one at the end is you can't be a jerk. We actually make all of our clients sign a contract that says, I will not be a jerk. And so I think if people look at that and say, how do I bring that into my own company, right? There's a lot of innovation. So if you're selling widgets, you're selling books, you're trying to make a TV series, you're trying to run a sales leadership company, is what you're talking about so clearly defined with the right vocabulary that a 15-year-old, and they are the hardest audience to convince of anything, they would go, yep, that's important stuff. Yep, I understand what you're doing. And if not, stop right there and have a big brainstorm with your team and copywriting session and figure it out. And then, the same thing, the 10-year thing is about innovation change. And again, COVID forced many companies to do this, right? We have a brilliant client that does sales leadership, and they run into the big stadiums and they train the salespeople on how to sell tickets. Well, they can't do that. So their entire business had to shift virtually. And it's very successful. The reason it is because what they're selling and teaching is universal, and the need they're filling will be a need going on. So it became just logistics. And so I think that's the other thing. In 10 years, will people buy what you're selling? And if they won't, that's your chance to say, maybe I need to merge with a company that's doing something a little bit ahead and we can make something cooler and better. Maybe I need to change how this business operates, or maybe I need to go out and bring in people I've never considered hiring that have new thoughts, new ways of doing things, new perspectives, and really allow them to do it. And so that's what we do for clients a lot of the time. But yeah, I think that those, and then when you go to the do good, are you doing good in the world? We really ask clients to think about that. Is your message inspiring? And we're not like the motivational people where we want you to come and meditate every day. We're saying, is what you're doing creating positive change or positive thought or positive action? And so we represent people that are kind of like the father of impact investing, probably the biggest innovator in senior living care and memory care. We represent, of course, a few celebrities and things, but our celebrities are these CEOs and founders of very large companies that have gone into this sort of legacy period of their life. And they're really conscious of the minutes they have on the planet and the way that their money helps and inspires others. And so we have a very diverse client base. Most of them are authors by default, because in order to inspire, you need to get your message out there. Many of them, we do documentaries for the work they do. We have, I guess our clients are probably some of our most diverse people, right? We've got pastors of massive, huge churches. We've got CEOs and maverick vanguards. We're in, one of our clients is from China, and she's this brilliant wealth manager for women and has a very different way of managing wealth. So I can go on and on. I'm very proud of our client base. But for us, it's about really looking and holding true to those 5 things, right?
You know what I've just learned? Why I'm getting so many good guests from TGC Worldwide. It's this no jerk policy. I'm bringing it in across everything now. It's good.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, not to ramble on about it, but it was life-changing to me because, the company I mentioned I had 20 years prior, and I know that this will resonate with a lot of your audience. you just get up every day and you're like, gosh, it's so hard to get through the day because work, relationship, family, friend, whatever, it's so filled with drama and people are just not being conscious and they're being mean and rude. And after 20 years in the very, very cut and throat business of direct response, that's all I did every day was just like wait for another argument or another tense situation. Yeah. And I thought, the people that I want in my life have to be so filled with gratitude that they want to pay it forward, because otherwise I'm exhausted. And so when I drew that line, and we literally did, I had my lawyer, people think this is funny, I had my lawyer draft up a no jerk clause. So it's legally binding that you have to do it. And it has made such the difference. And I think if you look at your own company, your own family, your own relationships, and you say, if I have to live by the no jerk rule and everyone around me does, well, boy, we have a lot of time to do great things in the world because we're not just being jerks to each other. And so when you think about diversity and inclusion, and more importantly, when you think about you're on a mission to do something great, the mission becomes more driven and quicker and faster to get there if everyone wants to come with you. Yeah. And if they like you, because you're not a jerk, you're going to grow faster and prosper and get your message out. And I think, to me, when you run a company and you think about inclusion in general, have you set up systems in your company that makes it so that nobody feels like somebody's being a jerk to them? Is your HR policy set up the right way? And we sort of look at that the way when we talk to our clients and we say, how are you doing this in your business?
Excellent. Excellent. Charlie, it's been a pleasure to meet you and to get your sound and sensible thinking. In this extra special Charlie Fusco BV-TV WebShow, I've been talking to the founder and CEO of TGC Worldwide, Charlie Fusco. Isn't it time, viewers, that you became a more talked about company? Thank you, Charlie.
Super, super appreciate the time. Love the work you're doing. Thanks so much.